We went out and rummaged through the German quarters, officer quarters. See what we could find. I found my identification card. If my eyes were better, I could find it out here too.
Good sweep through.
It's in one of those. There's a brown paper envelope with the original. What is that?
No, newspaper clippings. Sorry, guys. Like I said, Ivan had stuff done to his eyes yesterday, and so they're.
Yeah, I had a needle stuck in my eye, right through into the retina yesterday. And that's the 12th time I've had it. So this eye is got a black spot in the front. I can't see anything right there, but I can see sideways, not clear. But this one, I hope I can keep it so that I can see you, see your happy smiles and nice faces and nice yawns. So far, so good. I've been going to the eye clinic for a year, every 6 weeks, getting a needle in my eye. Ouch, that's what I said. I said ouch one day, and he said, it hurt? I said, yes. And he says, can you see the light? He got a light on his head. And I said, what light? He said, don't scare me like that. He thought maybe it hit the optic nerve, but but I still have the eyesight there, but I don't drive my car anymore. I let my kids drive it when their cars are in the garage. That's what daddies do, you know. Keep it with gas and keep the battery charged, and they come over and borrow it. They all borrowed it. I have 3 daughters that live in the same street. Huh?
There's a copy of it in this.
Yeah, well, I think I have some in for the handouts in here too.
There's a copy, right?
Yeah. Well, you can show it around to them.
Here, you do that.
So that's the copy that I found when I rummaged through. There's my German identification card. You can see what I look like and my fingerprints. Just show that around there and you can take it. Got it? I get it back or else I'll check all of you with my laser. And I also found a tie pin in one of the German officers' desks. There was a tie pin that you put in your tie, and it had the 1914-18 cross and the Iron Cross on it. And I got that at home too. But we were in there. The Germans left at 12 o'clock noon. We had everything going again at 3 o'clock, and 6 o'clock the Russian tanks came in, flattened the barbed wire fence. And here's our allies come to save us. What did they do? They surrounded our camp with their guards. We were free to go anywhere in the camp, but they fingerprinted us all. The Russians did. We didn't know what was happening. One day the American trucks came out the side of the camp to take us back to their lines, and the Russian turned them away at gunpoint. We didn't know what was happening. We had rumors saying that something to do with the exchange of prisoners that was going on at the Yalta Conference at that time. Each side had prisoners of the other side. So we just bided our time for another 10 days or so to see what's going to happen. We were fingerprinted. We had the run of the camp. Whenever we told them, the Russians, that we're hungry, we needed some milk. For the ones that were sick, they would go up to the farm and lead a milk cow in and said, "Milker, you got milk." We tell them we want some beef, we need some protein. They'd go and get a steer and lead it in. They said, "Kill it, you got meat." They were good that way. Tell them we want potatoes, they'd go out and get a truckload of potatoes and bring them in. Or a truckload of bread. So they fed us as good as they could, I guess. Because they had a big army there too. And they were fighting, trying to get Berlin away from Hitler. But in April, May, the Russians came and said, "Okay, you're going to the American lands today." We looked out, and here on that road was all Russian trucks heading west. That's where we wanted to go because the Americans were over there. So we just left everything and jumped on the trucks, and they took us to the River Elbe. Of course, there was no bridges on the River Elbe because we bombed them all. But the Americans had built a pontoon bridge across the River Elbe. And we walked across the pontoon bridge to the American side. That's when I thought, I am on the way home now. Finally, after 2 years. The Americans took us to the hospital in Leipzig for 10 days to feed us up, and after delousing us and everything else, fed us and checked us over at the hospital. Then they took us into Brussels, flew us back to England. Then in England, I had to go around and try and find all my belongings that were left there when I didn't come back that night, July the 3rd. But I sent them a letter. We had Kriegsgefangenen letters that we'd send. I sent one to them, telling them to take all the stuff that I had there to my sister's aunt in Ilford, Essex. So that's where this uniform went. We didn't fly with these things. We flew in battle dress. So this uniform, I go out there and I could pick it up, and she had it all nicely pressed and everything. This uniform I got in 1942 from King Edward VI, wasn't it? Do you know who King Edward VI was? Okay, I'll tell you. I was 15 years old when King George V died. When was I born? He died in 1935.
1920.
Huh?
1920.
1920, right. I was 15 years old when King George V died. Who took over? I'm asking your teachers and your parent now. Who took over from King George V?
King George
King
the
George
Sixth.
VI?
Huh?
King George the Sixth.
No way. See? This is a history lesson I'm giving your teachers that don't know.
This is good.
Usually the Prince of Wales took over from his father when he died. The Prince of Wales, he loved Alberta. He used to come here 2 or 3 times a year. He had a ranch out beside High River there, Prince of Wales Ranch. His brand was EP. Still no thing. He took over from his father, King George V. That was King Edward VIII. King Edward VIII took over from King George V. You didn't know you were going to get a history lesson, did you? Okay, King Edward VIII fell in love with an American lady who was twice divorced. When he wanted to marry her, the House of Lords said, "No way. You cannot marry out of royalty." The Church of England said, "No way. You cannot marry a twice divorced lady." So what did King Edward VIII do? He says, "You can have your stupid throne. I advocate in favor of my younger brother George." So that's George VI then was king. And that's the king we fought under. King George VI. He gave me this uniform. He commissioned me as an officer in the Royal Canadian Air Force. And when did, this is still a history lesson for you people, when did King George VI die? 1952. And who took over?
King George the Seventh.
This is your teacher that said that. Queen Elizabeth II. And she's still queen today. Over 50 years. 55 years. 56 years this year. And when my wife and I were married 65 years, we got a nice card from Queen Elizabeth from Buckingham Palace, and a picture of her waving to us, congratulating us on our diamond anniversary. I don't think I have that card with me, but we got lots of cards when we're married, and when we're on our 65th Diamond Jubilee. No, Diamond Anniversary. Diamond Jubilee is 75, and I'm working on that. 67 years this year. Oh, did you push that button there while you were here this week and see my picture in there? You did, eh? Was it older or younger than I am today? Here's a picture of my pilot and my navigator and me. After I went overseas, I'm going to jump around all over the place now. After I went overseas, my wife enlisted in the Canadian Women's Army Corps to see if she could get over to England to be with me. By the time she finished her course, she was stationed at Suffield, at the hospital in Suffield Experimental Station down near Medicine Hat. When she got the dreaded telegram that your husband, Flying Officer J.I. Anderson, is missing in action, July the 3rd, 1943. I asked her what she did when she got that telegram. And she said, well, I cried. I said, in your beer? But there she is. You'll see why I married her. That was her in the army, and there. That was the coal miner's daughter.
Hey, Ivan, what about the other telegram she received?
The one that she received about a month and a half or 2 months later says, we're pleased to inform you that your husband, Flight Lieutenant Anderson J.I., is now a prisoner of war in Germany. And I guess I didn't ask her what she said when she got that telegram, but I imagine she was very happy that I was still alive after 5 weeks on the run through Belgium and France. So I have both those telegrams at home. She saved them for me in her album. There's the tunnel. I'm giving you one of these, Darren.
Thank you.
Plus other things. This is what, the 27th or 29th school that I'm talking to here?
At least the 27th or 29th. You're up there.
Yeah, I know I'm up there. That's Stalag 3. We had a big picture up there, but they... Oh, there it is there. I'll give you one of those too, Darren.
Thank you.
Usually every 5 years, the Prisoners of War Association holds a reunion. We've been to one in Regina, one in Toronto, one in Vancouver. In 1985, we had one in Calgary here. Prisoners of War reunion. We expected to have around 600 people come, but we got reservations from over 950, I think it was. And we had to try and find accommodation for them all. We took over the University of Calgary. All the student residences there, took over them to house them. And we still had to go to Motel Village and do a couple of the motels too, to do them all there. But 960 people came here for 10 days, and we showed them a real Calgary welcome. Took them to the Heritage Park. We took them to a rodeo out here. Rodeo, what's the name of that one out here?
Simons Valley Ranch.
Something 8? Sure 7? We took them to Banff, we took them to Lake Louise, we fed them in the Banff Hotel, Banff Springs Hotel. We took them to a meadow out there where we had a barbecue. We had 20 Cardinal buses to take them around. And of course, we paid for it all because their fee for coming to Calgary was so much that we had it all built in there. So we paid for everything. They didn't have to pay for anything. We even paid for the cooks in the student residences that stayed there. We fed them all at the university. And they appreciated it because they didn't have to lay their cooks off for the summer. We said, keep them, we need them. We've got to feed 1,000 people here. So we showed them a good time in Calgary here.
So Ivan,
Yeah,
you left us in suspense. You've just picked your uniform up in England from your sister's aunt,
yeah.
and then what?
Then I had a couple of weeks in England to say goodbye to the friends that I'd made. And then they took us to Liverpool and put us on the Ile-de-France. When we went over to England, we went on the Volendam, a Dutch ship. We got on it in Halifax, and 2 days later we walked off it into the warehouse. Food was no good. The only things we had was hammocks to hang above the tables. And the commanding officer talked us into getting back on the ship. He would get better food and get better accommodation, everything for us. And like fools, we walked back on the boat. What did they do? They pulled us out into the harbor and stuck us there for another 6-7 days. And we couldn't get off of there at all. I think they were waiting for the roughest weather of the North Atlantic. Because when they finally did pull up anchor and go out from Montreal Bay there, the waves were 16, 20 feet high, tossing our ship up in the air and then catching it again. We had 2 destroyers to take us over to England. Day and a half out of Halifax, one of those destroyers was blown up by a German torpedo. 110 men lost their lives. A day and a half out of Halifax. The other destroyer, of course, had to circle all around us and in the front and in the back, and he took us the rest of the way to England, but we had to change position or what do you call it? Course every 20 seconds. So the German torpedoes couldn't get a sight on you. So it took us 15 days to get over there. I think we went away down to the Azores and froze up, and then They took us to Gurrick, Scotland. We got on the train and went all the way down to southern England at Bournemouth. They were posted, were billeted in all the hotels down there. Finally, we got to an operational training unit at Wellesbourne, where those Wellington planes were. We trained on them at Wellesbourne. Then when we went to a station, I went to 425 Squadron up in Dishforth, Yorkshire. We had all brand new Wellingtons. The D. Donald we had was brand new, just out of the factory. So we flew that for, well, we had a couple of crashes with it, but those things happen in wartime. You're coming back, you don't know if you got a flat tire because all the anti-aircraft guns that are shooting at you while you're over there. We didn't know if our tires were flat. We didn't know if our brakes were going to work until we land. And then we land and there's no brakes and there's a flat tire and it turns you around like this. And your undercarriage goes and you lose a motor. And then sometimes you come back. One day coming back, one of our motors in the Wellington was hit by shrapnel from a anti-aircraft gun, and the oil was leaking out of it. We had a 50-gallon drum in the aircraft, and we pumped 50 gallons of oil into that motor just to keep it going so the pilot could keep the plane as good as he could to come back to Canada, to come back to England. It brought us back and we landed at the first airport in England, which is a runway about 10 miles long. Every time you come back from a trip and you're in trouble, you landed at that airport. Because if you had no brakes, you'd go and go and go, and then finally, if you're going too fast, you'll end up in the potato field in the end. But anybody who landed there, we would phone aircraft priority to our base and say, we're back in England, but we're in trouble, you better come and pick us up tomorrow. So that happened 3 or 4 times. For 14 years, I was going out to Calgary Academy to tell my story out there. So I told my story to all the grades from grade 4 to grade 12, 2 or 3 times, I think, 14 years. In 2005, I got an invitation from them to attend their grade 12 graduation. So I got dressed up and went down. And who was the first one that was called up to get their grade 12 diploma? Ivan Anderson. I got my grade 12 diploma at 85 years old. I went to a country school, 80 students, 1 teacher. 80 students, 1 teacher in a country school. Grade 1 to 8. If you passed grade 8, you could quit and go and work for some farmers. Or if you're 16 years old, you could quit school. I wanted more. I took correspondence courses from the government for grades 9, 10, and 11. I still went to school because the teacher there, even though she was maybe from normal school or she did have her teacher's certificate, she helped in any of the questions for grade 9, 10, and 11. Then I had to go to work. I worked in the sawmill for 2 winters and a farmhand for 2 summers. Same farmhand, same sawmill. And I had enough money because you got $1 a day board and room. I told my mother I was going to go to Winnipeg for a holiday because she had 2 brothers in Winnipeg. My dad had 2 sisters just outside of Winnipeg at Larivire. And the last thing my mother said to me, don't let the military put any ideas in your head. This was in 1940. The next time she saw me, I was a sergeant in the Air Force with my wings and married. So that little advice that she gave me, don't let the military put any ideas in your head, didn't do very good. 'Cause when I got to Winnipeg, I went into the RCAF recruiting officer and said, I want to be a radio man on airplanes. And he took my information and had my medical, and then they said, well, you can go home now and we'll call you when we have an opening. I said, uh-oh. If I go home now, you won't get me until I'm conscripted. And I was 20 years old. Conscription came at 21. I said, you won't get me until you call me up for service when I'm 21. If I go back 400 miles now, you wouldn't get me till then. And they said, well, are you staying in Winnipeg over the weekend? And I said, yes, I am. I got visiting to do. And they said, well, come in Monday morning and we'll see what we can do. Monday morning I went in and they said, Mr. Anderson, here's a ticket to Brandon, get your uniform. So I was in the Air Force before I was conscripted. That's why I didn't get my grade 12 diploma until I was 85.